This is How to Study History Part 2, and it was compiled as a result of people asking myself, how do you put video together, where do you get your equipment, what are the struggles you go through? So in this study, it will be divided into two parts. The first part will be dealing with natural history, and the second part will be dealing with human history. And as I encourage you at all times, everything you see in this study, please research for yourself. We are living in very interesting times where man is trying to offer some very odd solutions or delusions to the accelerated pandemonium that is taking place on the earth. Through the power of modern celluloid storytelling, a modern upgrade of the oral tradition, man is being reintroduced into the inherited ancient folklore of old, but it all looks very, very dark. As a few well-off men who have enough money combined to feed the world's poor many times over, use their gazillions to fulfill their childhood dreams and fantasies, by launching themselves just outside of the Earth's atmosphere and getting a topographical Google Earth scale view in space of our planet. They are giving people the false impression that this will one day be a reality for everyone, well, those who have money that is, where environments that are uninhabitable for the mortal respiratory structure of the human body, they believe will one day become man's new home. But the narrator, in his own private bias, likes to approach life a bit differently through both reality, research, and through faith. This planet we call Earth, for the many years it has been spinning around its own axis. Through many geological changes in different parts of the Earth, has still been able to retain a lot of its original beauty that still keeps photographers, travelers, tourists, trekkers, and young and old spellbound at its breathtaking beauty. The narrator, whose life is usually revolved around sitting on a chair surrounded by volumes of books, decided by invitation to come out of his comfort zone and took the advice he usually gives to others and spend some quality time in the outdoors in the peace, quiet and calm of nature, a place where many come to escape and to de-stress. And when the narrator was treading up the mountain range of Scotland, you are humbled by the magnitude of the beauty of creation. The camera does a grave injustice to its true appearance. Man's very first school teacher was nature. It was not to be deified as historical indigenous tribes and the modern evolutionary ayahuasca cultural mindset falls prey to, but it was to be cared for and closely studied, where man was to learn its secrets and give homage, honor and respect to its detailed artistic designer. The fossil record and geological column can teach us vital lessons from the past, and two Western scholars have laid a solid foundation for this study. The Greek world was one of the first ancient schools that closely analyzed in detail the records of the past, and one of its first credible scholars, Strabo, said that a work on geography also involves theory of no means value, the theory of the arts, of natural science, as well as the theory which lies in the fields of history and myths and the mathematical science. In the Scottish Highlands, a scientific and theological intellectual was to continue that train or school of thought by also understanding that you have to study a variety of different topics. And Thomas Dick also said that history embraces a record and description of past facts in reference to all the nations and ages of the world, insofar as they are known and have been transmitted to our time. As natural history contains a record of the operations of the Creator in the material world, so sacred and civil history embraces a record of his transactions in the moral and intellectual world. The study of nature is the study of the Creator. For the more we may know of the work, the more accurate and comprehensive will be our views of the intelligence by whom it was designed. Of all the memorials of the past history of our globe, the most interesting are those myriad of remains of organized bodies which exist in the interior of its outer crust. In these we find traces of innumerable orders of beings existing under different circumstances, succeeding one another at distant epochs and varying through multiplied changes of form. In the lowest beds of loose soil and in peat bogs are found the remains of elephant, rhinoceros, hippopotamus, elk, etc. of different species from which now exist, but belonging to the same genera. Numerous species of animals have been found embedded in the second strata, no living examples of which are now to be found in any quarter of the globe. As trained paleontologists continue to discover the skeletal remains of the many extinct creatures that once freely roamed the vast terrain of this planet, after hundreds and thousands of years, the Earth is giving up its secrets, and new data and material is continuing to shed new light on how this Earth once looked. And many of these finds are challenging orthodox secular thinking and shattering preconceived ideas about how this Earth once looked. Would you believe the narrator if he told you that the biodiversity that currently inhabits the African continent was once in Eurasia, that includes the very cold country of Siberia in Russia in northern Asia? Lake Baikal in southern Siberia that freezes over in the winter is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume, containing 22 to 23% of the world's fresh surface water, more than all North American lakes combined. It is the world's oldest, deepest and clearest lake on Earth, and Siberia has the most coldest city and town on the Earth. But was it always like that, or has there been geological changes over time? Would you believe that mammals like the rhino, the elephant, the ox-like bison and the lion once roamed in a country that pushes temperatures down to 85 degrees below zero, that is even colder than Mars? Fasten your seatbelts and follow the narrator on this journey, and let us take a sneak peek back in time so we can see what life was like in what is now one of the coldest regions on the Earth, so we can piece together the past. Though Siberia still has some moderate temperatures throughout the year, a cave lion cub corpse was preserved in permafrost in the world's coldest city in Siberia. The most complete specimen of the extinct steppe bison was discovered in northern Siberia. The most complete frozen mummy of a woolly rhino that weighed 2 tons was discovered in a gold mine in northeast Siberia. And the most intact baby woolly mammoth was recently discovered also in Siberia. These are all mammals that still exist in Africa, though differing a little, but are now extinct in Siberia, as Thomas Dix said. So what happened to them? Many have different theories on geological and climatic changes, but they are not ideas that the narrator embraces.
"300 million years ago, there was no Africa, Asia, Americas, or Europe. Just one big supercontinent. Pangea."
The narrator takes on board the divine counsel of not getting trapped into endless genealogies, and the aim of this section of the study is not to speculate on the age of the Earth or how the continents were formed, but to closely observe the climatic and geological changes of the Earth over time and the successive extinction of different species that has taken place all over the Earth. We will be looking at fossil remains at London's Natural History Museum that has a treasure trove of material that helps piece together the ancient world, and the Museum of London that also helps us to see how London and the rest of Europe once looked. On a road called Bentinck Street in central London, once lived a man who laid a foundation on the studies on the development on the structure of the Earth. His name was James Smithson. He was a French-born, Oxford-educated English chemist and mineralogist, born into nobility, and a member of the Royal Society. His research papers and his donations laid the foundation for a research institute that was named in his honor by the US government, the Smithsonian, and we will be quoting from them as a credible source for reliable, trustworthy data. In another place called Pennywell Road in Earl's Court in southwest London, once lived another man who is credited with discovering the gas helium, Sir Joseph Norman Lockyer. Though he is relatively unknown today, he was an English scientist and astronomer who was the founder and the first editor of the influential journal Nature magazine. We will also be quoting from that source material as a reference for respected peer-reviewed data. Over the years, the narrator has filmed animals in parks, cities, zoos, in the garden, and in forests in the countryside with his cameras. And what is very interesting is that the Earth that we live in today is nothing more than a shell of what it once was. We are only seeing around us the last remains of both the animal and the vegetable kingdom. Not much is left. And as paleontologists continue to unearth and collect data on the taxonomy of both the animal and the vegetable kingdom, they have come to a very startling and interesting conclusion concerning life on this Earth. In a peer-reviewed paper published in February 1997 titled A Model of Mass Extinction, it documented that it is known that almost all the species which have lived on the Earth are now extinct. More than 99% of all species that ever lived are extinct, according to the New York Times. Over 99% of all creatures that have ever existed are extinct, according to the Smithsonian. More than 99% of all living organisms that have ever lived on Earth are extinct. 75 to more than 90% of all living species on Earth have disappeared in a geological blink of an eye, according to National Geographic. So what happened to this Earth over time that has wiped out most of the species on the Earth? Let us go back in time again and let's look at the drastic changes over time. You may be shocked at what you see. Mushrooms are a fungi that grows among grass and upon trees, but many people still eat it as a delicacy. But it pales in comparison to what it was originally in size. Recent studies have shown that giant mushrooms were colossal in size at one time in the Earth, and they were, according to the Smithsonian, 24 feet tall and 3 feet wide. What on earth happened? The narrator was born, raised, and still currently lives in the United Kingdom in the Northern Hemisphere in Europe. The geological and climatic conditions are totally different to what it once was. Even the creatures aren't the same. Let the narrator explain. When he was a young child, his parents took him to the Caribbean in the British West Indies so he can see his heritage. There was a creature that in Grenada on his father's side they call a congaree. But this many-legged arthropod exoskeleton creature is better known as the millipede that can fit into your hand. But it is no match in size to its early forebears in Britain across the Atlantic. For when paleontologists were excavating the rocks in England, what they discovered blew them away, for they have recently unearthed the largest ever millipede fossil found on Northumberland Beach, according to the BBC in 2021, and it was over 8 feet in length. That is hench. Something has definitely happened over time, as Thomas Dick said, and creatures have not been evolving but are shrinking. I wonder why. England has been credited as being the home that laid the foundations of the embryonic beginnings of fossil hunting by reintroducing to the modern world in the 19th century an extinct species of giant reptile that was unheard of for years. Most reptiles we see today around the world all generally look like the same cold-blooded predators. But there is one that looks like it still resembles its early forebears. It has been called the Komodo dragon, that is endemic to the Indonesian islands in Asia. But what do they resemble? A man who was the Dean of Westminster in London, England, who was educated and taught at Oxford University and was Professor of Geology there, has been credited as being the pioneer of introducing the extinct reptile to the modern world, where he gave lectures to his many students on his recent discoveries. He was an English theologian, geologist and paleontologist whose name was William Buckland, and the jawbone on the bottom left of this picture was of an extinct reptile called the Megalosaurus, which was discovered in Oxfordshire. If you were to ever visit London, England, and go to a place called Crystal Palace in the south of London, when you come out of the station, if you take a right, you will see a sign pointing to Dinosaur Park that is around a quarter of a mile away. And as you enter into that park, you'll find a history of dinosaur research dated to around 1854. And at the entrance, you'll find a big old head of a dinosaur carved into the ground as a memorial to the embryonic beginnings of dinosaur studies. And 2 centuries later, they are still standing as a testament to this early investigative research, which up until that time, very few had even heard of dinosaurs. And England became the nursery of that investigative research. And in the Natural History Museum is a bust of a man who founded that museum, whose name is Richard Owen. And he coined the phrase dinosaur in 1841. And this is what he said. The combination of such characters, some as the sacred ones altogether peculiar among reptiles, others borrowed, as it were, from groups now distinct from each other, and all manifested by creatures far surpassing in size the largest of existing reptiles, will, it is presumed, be deemed sufficient ground for establishing a distinct tribe of saurian reptiles, for which I would propose the name which he coined, dinosaur. Now the word dinosaur, according to the Oxford Concise Dictionary, means terrible lizard. They are, according to Virtue's English Dictionary, one of a group of huge terrestrial fossil reptiles peculiar to the upper secondary formations, as Thomas Dick said, but some of them are carnivorous, so most dinosaurs were herbivores. In London's Natural History Museum, there is a dinosaur that has been called Iguanodon or Iguodon that is on display, and it was a herbivore or a vegetarian. That is very different to how Hollywood usually presents most of them, and it was discovered on the Isle of Wight in the United Kingdom in the year 1914. Recently, more dinosaur remains are being unearthed from the ground, and we are seeing that Britain today was totally different to how it was in its embryonic beginnings, and the Isle of Wight has been proving one of the most interesting dinosaur excavation sites on the planet, showing to us creatures that we would not be in a hurry to bump into on the way to work.
These bones look like they could belong to any other dinosaur. Just a pelvic and tail vertebra left as clues. But this latest find, discovered on the Isle of Wight, has paleontologists buzzing.
We've actually, with these fragments, been able to piece together the biggest meat-eating terrestrial dinosaur in Europe. It's absolutely amazing.
Scientists who led the research estimate it exceeded 10 meters in length, perhaps more given its African cousin Spinosaurus aegypticus was the largest meat-eating dinosaur of all time.
We see that in the 21st century, the world we now live in, at least in terms of animals and plants, is only a shell of what it once was, where countless numbers of the biodiversity of different species that could be numbered in thousands or even millions has gone extinct over different periods of time, as Thomas Dick has said. Now, one of the problems with the way that people look at the earth is how the world is taught to them about its origins. Secular science teaches that dinosaurs just emerged from nowhere and were eventually wiped out in 3 different successive periods or ages called Triassic, Jurassic and Cretaceous. And then other species just rose up from nowhere after them and replaced them. Now, in the book of Genesis, it teaches that every living thing was created and that each had their own distinct purpose and unique function. But beginning with Cain right up to this very day, man does not want to give God the credit that is due to his name as the overall designer of what his naked eye can see. But yet the physical evidence aligns with creation.
From a bird's head to a dinosaur's tail, remarkable discoveries have emerged from amber mines in northern Myanmar, encapsulating the teeming flora and fauna of an ancient forest capturing myriad kinds of ancient life.
Newsweek documented that a flesh-eating piranha-like fish once lived alongside dinosaurs. The Times of London documents that insects also lived alongside dinosaurs. And Nature and other journals also verify that mammals also once lived alongside the giant lizard, the dinosaur. Though these clouds of witnesses of scientific journals strengthen the Genesis account, scientists still teach the theory of evolution.
Magic gave birth to Eternia, the first planet in all of creation.
Evolution is forcing the animal kingdom to adapt, etc., etc.
We are on the cusp of propelling human evolution to a staggering new dimension.
Time to evolve into the species that we were meant to become.
Let us take a quick visit to a place that you would least expect to find colossus-sized dinosaurs alongside other creatures. The Antarctica is the coldest and the most desolate place on the Earth. It is the 5th largest continent that is geographically situated in the South Pole, overlain by a continental ice sheet containing about 90% of the world's ice, where 95% of the bedrock is hidden beneath a 2-mile ice cap, and it is the Earth's only continent without a native human population. It has been visited by a number of explorers from Eurasia to map out its vast uninhabited terrain so that the whole wider world has a clearer understanding of what it is like geographically. Some of the creatures that inhabit this very cold region are the seabird, the seagull, the mammal, the Antarctic fur seal, the aquatic flightless bird species, the penguin, and one of the most deadliest predators in the waters, nicknamed the wolves of the sea, the mammal, the orca, better known as the killer whale. But the Antarctica was once home to a tropical paradise and rainforest. But at what time it took a geological shift in its climatic change, the narrator will leave that to the professionals and the experts. It did once house the amphibian the frog, and this proves that its climate was a lot warmer, and a number of studies have confirmed that with the discovery of a frog fossil, the missing pieces of the Earth's past distant history is coming together. It also had lobsters that once searched for food on its ocean floorbed, so it was definitely warmer. But these fossils of a huge dinosaur, the skull of a huge bird, and different land and sea plants is also valid proof that the Antarctica was not always a continent that was totally covered in ice. The fossilized giant bird called Pelagornithid had a 21-foot wingspan that some experts estimate could make it the biggest flying bird thus far on record. And the 15-ton sea monster called Elasmosaur, who makes these names, was the heaviest of its kind, so like the rest of the world, the Antarctica also had colossus-sized creatures. And with all of these discoveries on this vast continent, the narrator is given the viewers a glimpse of a portion of the 99% of the creatures that are no longer with us. Today, man is also discovering creatures that are currently confined to specific geographies. This is a fossil of a crocodile found in the infamous Mesopit in Germany in Western Europe. Crocodiles are found in tropic regions of Africa, Asia, Australia, and the Americas. Does this mean that Europe was once tropical? In the Green River Formation in Wyoming and in Utah was discovered an early fossilized horse in ancient North America. And in London's Natural History Museum is the skull of a horse that was discovered in Argentina in South America. Horses are quadruped mammals that are meant to be introduced into the Americas with the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century. So what happened to history? Because light is being shed that at one time in Afro-Eurasia, these three continents were once home to the exact same creatures, and many of them are still preserved in a place that the ancient world once called the land of Kush. Africa is the second largest continent in the world, the only one to be situated in all four cardinal hemispheres, and the only continent to stretch from the northern temperate to southern temperate zones. It is surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean. It has a variety of biome habitat that includes aquatic grassland, huge forests, a huge desert, canyons that hold volumes of water, with climates varying from unbearable subtropical temperatures to freezing cold ice-capped mountains. Its living organisms comprise around a quarter of global biodiversity, and it supports the world's largest intact assemblage of megafauna species, or large mammals. One of them is the tallest living terrestrial animal in the world that is endemic to Africa, named after the Arabic Somali word giraffe, which is said to mean long-necked. A number of visual manuscripts from China in Asia, dated to the 1400s, shows images of an Asian handler with a giraffe that shows that trade once existed between the continent of Africa and the continent of Asia. How vast it was and for how long the narrator cannot say. But in Egyptian tombs in North Africa, dated around the 1400s BC, there are images from the land of Punt that some say is in Somalia, and also from ancient Nuba in modern-day Sudan, that shows that this animal has been used for trade for thousands of years. And this exotic and unique creature, whose fully grown males reach heights to 18 to 20 feet tall, has been preserved in some of Africa's oldest art. The two Dabous giraffes in north-central Nigeria in West Africa are the largest known life-size petroglyphs or animal carvings anywhere in the world. But as men are now closely analysing Africa's much neglected natural history, recent discoveries are helping to piece together an episode in Earth's history that was once viewed as a mythological saga, and we are now getting a glimpse of a few of those 99% extinct creatures that once walked this earth. They have discovered 6 new species of mammals in Ethiopia in the Horn of Africa, according to the Washington Post. One of them was an extinct animal called Aristenotherium that stood 7 feet tall. This is how it would have stood alongside modern man, and one of its fossilized remains that was found in Egypt is on display in London's Natural History Museum. This is the jawbone of an extinct mammal found in Kenya in East Africa called a Simba Kubwa Kotok Africa. This is its jawbone alongside a modern African lion. And these are modern artists' impression of what it would have looked like alongside modern man. When scientists closely observed this creature, they discovered it was huge, and National Geographic documented that it was even larger than a modern-day polar bear. And in South Africa, they also found an odd-looking creature, fossil remains, called a Lystrosaurus. It has also been discovered in both Russia and the Antarctica. And like the Antarctica, not only has it extinct animals, but South Africa also has seagulls, seals, penguins, and killer whales. And like Antarctica, also in the north of Africa, what is now a desert was also once originally a vast forest and a huge lake. Though you cannot see him, the narrator is a passenger on the back of this moped in Marrakesh in Morocco in North Africa. 10 years ago, in the year 2012, filmed with the era just before he started even at the doors. Now Morocco has a lot of history buried underneath its sands, and though the advertisements for tourists depicts its desert, today it is totally different to what it once was. In the narrator's hand is a shark's tooth that was unearthed in the sands of Morocco. What is a shark's tooth doing in the middle of a desert? In a volume of books written by Johann Heinrich Barth, a 19th century German explorer and ethnographer, he documented the desert landscape of the Sahara, and this is what he said. The Wadi Tellezag Valley contains some remarkable sculptures deserving our particular attention. It bears testimony to a state of life very different from which we once accustomed to see in these regions. The Arabic word as-Sahara al-Kubra means great wilderness or great desert, and the Sahara is the world's largest tropical desert that stretches across Africa from the Atlantic coast through Egypt to the Red Sea, and it once housed animals that are no longer with us. The Nigerosaurus was a sauropod that means either having long neck or having a long tail. An extinct dinosaur that was discovered in the Sahara in Niger in West Africa. And from the study of its dung and feces, it was a plant-eating herbivore. Deltodomus adilis, from this artist's impression and its skeletal remains, is an extinct reptile that was discovered in the Kemkeng beds in eastern Morocco. So the species that lived there were totally different to the ones that are barely alive today. And this tooth of a species discovered in Morocco also was of a creature that was absolutely huge. Can you imagine a creature whose neck was once longer than a giraffe's and was the size of a small plane? Well, there was once a creature like that, and when this flying reptile from Morocco was measured alongside modern man, you can clearly see the ratio in size. The pterosaur was a flying reptile that was the size of a small plane that had a much longer neck than a giraffe. And this is what once patrolled the African skies before it became extinct alongside a number of other creatures. In a document published by the scientific community, a number of human remains were discovered in Niger, and among the burials were found one of the oldest fish hooks on Earth that shows it was once a place where a community once fished. And in the Sahara Desert they found remains of the reptile the turtle, sharks, stingrays and catfish remains. They also found a huge fish that is now extinct that had one big mouth. And the Sahara, like the Antarctica, has gone through a climatic change through its history, for it was once green, according to Reuters, that once contained the world's largest lake called Megachad that flowed right into the Mediterranean in Europe, that has recently been discovered as an ancient network that was discovered buried under the Sahara sand, where thousands of fish were uncovered that included the catfish and the tilapia. And some of these fish were massive sea creatures, where the Sahara was home to some of the largest sea creatures in history. Today, the Sahara is going through another major extinction, where 86% of the modern big animals in the Sahara are extinct or endangered. And a study published in 2013 documented the collapse of the Sahara's megafauna, or large mammals, that the majority has disappeared from more than 90% of their Saharan range. Of the 14 species and subspecies assessed, 10, that is 71%, are endemic to the Sahara or the wider Sahara region, and 12, that is 86%, are considered by the IUCN Red List to be either extinct in the wild or globally threatened with extinction. 13 of the 14 species have disappeared from 66% or more of their historical Sahara range, and 9 species have disappeared from 90% or more of their range. But many of these creatures once lived in Eurasia. The animals that roamed the African savanna were once all over the continent, as Johann Heinrich Barth observed, and the cave art in the Sahara still preserved in Niger, Algeria, Libya and Egypt show animals that are usually around water, and some of them still live in the desert. Its modern scientific family name is Proboscidian, that is, mammals which have the nose prolonged into a reprehensible trunk, as the elephant. Elephants are the largest land animals on the earth that are found in both Africa and in India and South Asia. But there was a time they and their close relatives were in every single continent. The now extinct herbivorous plant-eating mammal, the Dinotherium, once lived in Afro-Eurasia, in East Africa, Southern Europe and in India. It had a long trunk and its two tusks curved inward under its big jaw. London's Natural History Museum has one of its heads on display. In the same museum is the extinct mastodon. This one was found in North America, and it looks huge. And recently, miners looking for gold discovered the remains of another mastodon in Colombia in South America. And in that same geological region was found another close herbivorean relative. In the snow-capped mountains and glacier regions of Argentina in South America, once lived an Archaeopteryx. It had tusks that came out of its bottom jaw, another set just under its trunk. They have been found in Peru in South America, and interestingly enough in the Antarctica and in northern Patagonia in Argentina, where one of its Argentinian finds are on display in London's Natural History Museum. There is another interesting place proboscideans have been found. London is the top global financial centre of the earth. It is the capital city of England with a population of over 9 million people that has more millionaires and 5-star hotels of any city of the world. And it would be difficult for people to recognise that elephants once lived in a city that was named by its Roman conquerors. But the British newspapers, the Telegraph, recorded under its main headline that Britain is a country that once resembled or looked like the African savannah. And the Sun newspaper said it once had woolly rhinos, giant lions, and super elephants. This is an elephant's foot found in Aveley in Essex. This is an elephant's jaw that was unearthed in South London. And this is an elephant's vertebrae that was discovered in Kent. So Britain was once flourishing with elephants, but it also had its close relative. Hollywood likes to sensationalize the past with the Western hypothesis called overkill, the unproven theory that mammoths were hunted into extinction by man, but the evidence is not supporting the theory. They have found mammoth remains in North America, but the highest number of mammoth remains thus far on record seem to be in Siberia in Russia in northern Asia. But this huge proboscidean also once lived in the continent of Europe. When the Chauvet cave in southeastern France was rediscovered, it holds some of the best preserved figurative cave paintings in the world that goes back to antiquity, and it has animals that you will usually only see in modern Africa. It had mammoths painted on its walls that confirmed they lived alongside humans. And in France also and throughout Europe, there are a number of highly sophisticated small sculptures of humans and animals that have been carved from the ivory of mammoth tusks, including an image of a mammoth itself.
This is the moment when a team of archaeologists in Devon, England found the tusk of a woolly mammoth from the Ice Age.
No, you take it off of me.
In the North Sea, they found a jaw of a human and a skull of a mammoth in a place that has recently been called Doggerland. That has confirmed that between England and Holland, it was all one land space before it became submerged underwater. And they are discovering more mammoth remains in the North Sea. And they also found mammoths in Cambridgeshire in the east of England, when a number of workmen were building a new extension or motorway, rediscovered this animal. This is a mammoth jaw in the Natural History Museum that was also discovered in the North Sea. And this is a mammoth in the same museum with its skull and tusk still intact. And in the Museum of London, they have on display a mammoth tusk and also a huge mammoth jaw. So we are now getting a clearer picture of the past, that this long-trunked mammal was once scattered all over the world. So the question we will ask ourselves again, was the Earth at one time in its history the same climate? The skull of an auroch, an extinct cattle, is on display in the Museum of London. The last one became extinct in Poland around 1627. It has also been discovered in some of the earliest art carved into stone and ivory in the continent of Europe, and the Chauvet painted artwork in southeastern France. They have been found among seals in the Indus Valley civilization in South Asia, in Nebuchadnezzar's temple in ancient Babylon, in modern-day Iraq, in artwork in Catalhuac in Asia Minor in modern-day Turkey, and in some of the oldest rock art in both Libya and in Egypt in North Africa. But there was another megafauna mammal that was also once all over the world that still strikes fear in both man and beast. Lions were once the most globally widespread mammal species with distinct populations in Africa, Eurasia and America. From Western Europe to Yukon, from the caves of Eurasia to the Arctic permafrost, the grasslands of the Northern Hemisphere used to belong to the cave lion. It is the closest relative of the lions that prowl around Africa and India today. It is strange for our minds to imagine this was once a sight that was seen in many parts of the world, a lion and its pride. Thousands of years before America was colonized by the West, paleontologists discovered lion bones that proved it once roamed the North American tundra millennia ago. And as shown earlier in this study, they have found the remains of very well preserved lion cubs in Siberia in Northern Asia. They are so well preserved from the permafrost that when you look at them up close in the hands of these Siberians, it looks like they only died very recently. One of the best examples of research in ancient lions is in the earliest artwork. Today, we see a pride of lions in Africa eating their prey, an African buffalo. But in the Chauvet cave art in southeastern France, you can see the lion pride once hunted down woolly mammoths for their daily meal. Now, the oldest known figurative art known to modern science is the mammoth ivory sculpture, the Lion Human of Hollenstein-Stadtdel in Germany. It has the head of a lion and a body of a man. The narrator filmed it when it was temporarily on display in London's Natural History Museum. Now, this image was to continue in Africa and in Asia, with the Egyptian deity Sekhmet, who has a head of a lion and the body of a man, and the Neo-Assyrian protective spirit deity called Ugala, which means the great lion, who also has the head of a lion and the body of a man. And if you ever wondered why there are no living lions left in Iraq in Western Asia, then you have to go to the Assyrian section of the British Museum and you will see that they were hunted on a regular daily basis. There is a whole exhibition dedicated to the Assyrian lion hunts. These guys were very, very brutal. Though the lions survived after the fall of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and the last known Asiatic lion was killed in the Tigris in 1918, the Assyrians definitely contributed towards its decline and later extinction. The lion is regularly frequented in Neo-Babylonian art with those brightly coloured glazed bricks. And in Phoenician art, an African is carved into ivory is being mauled by a lion. But in Egyptian art, the lion was one of the many animals the different coloured brown Nubians used as trade to their northern neighbours on the top far right. It is also in mosaic art from the ancient Roman period. If you ever visit London, England, the famous Trafalgar Square is adorned with beautifully carved black lions in stone. Do you want to know why? Because they also discovered the remains of lions in that era. It is only difficult for our minds to take in because we are trained to perceive the ancient world as functioning the same as the modern world. And in the Museum of London, they have on display a lion's skull that was found in Crayford in the London Borough of Bexley in southeast London. The lions that once roamed through the British Isles many millennia ago were 25% bigger than the ones that currently inhabit the African continent. So a lot of shrinking has taken place over time. So as we wrap up this section of the study, we will briefly look at the remaining creatures that once roamed the British Isles, how animals have shrunk over time, And what was the overall importance of studying natural history? A skull of a bear is on display in the Museum of London. And though bears can still be found in North America, South America, Europe and in Asia, they are extinct in the UK. A bison skull is also on display in the museum that was found in the UK. There are still bison in parts of Europe, and they also have plenty of them roaming around the United States of America. But in a cave called Kirkdale in the largest county in the UK, in Yorkshire, were found the remains of animals that still exist in Africa. The English paleontologist theologian John Buckland said that the present memoir, which relates to the history of the cave at Kirkdale, situated about 25 miles north-northeast of the city of York, is between Helmsley and the Kirby Moorside, which is the geology of the coast of Yorkshire, and what was found in this cave. He documents a number of these animals that the narrator has highlighted in green. The hyena, the elephant, the rhinoceros, the hippopotamus that once lived alongside tigers, bears, wolves, foxes, weasels and horses in England. So horses have been in the UK for a long while, and the discovery of this horse carved into ivory, one of the oldest pieces of art in the UK, shows that this animal lived alongside all of these other mammals, and its distant black and white striped relative, the zebra, still runs across the vast African savanna plains. In this portrait of William Buckley, on his left are the different animals found in the cave that included a big jaw of a hyena, where he holds a skull of one in both of his hands. Hyenas once roamed the British Isles freely for thousands of years. The world was a different place then, and recent evidence is coming to light that it also once lived in East Asia. And as more evidence is resurfacing, scientific journals are confirming that this carnivorous mammal once covered the whole of the continent of Europe one time in Earth's history. They can also be seen in cave art in southern France, as well as the sculpture found in that same country. And with all the different species of hyena that are still found in Africa, some very, very hairy and others less hairy, the discovery of a hyena skull in Germany and a hyena tooth in Siberia is showing us that the Earth at one time looked strikingly similar. In the UK, in London's famous River Thames, guess what was found? A herbivorous mammal once lived there, the megafauna called the hippo. Cambridge has one of the most respected universities in the world, but in that geographical area they found both a hippo's tusk and a hippo's tooth in Cambridgeshire. And this hippo's tooth was discovered in a place called Peckham in the south of London. Interesting. And they found this hippo vertebrate, guess where? In London's Regent Street. So we're getting a picture that the world we live in is completely changed, and that we are only seeing a small fraction of what it once was. The narrator will show one last mammal. The rhino is a herbivorous mammal that is usually found in both Africa and in Asia. But this is part of a rhino's jaw that was discovered in Graves Thurrock in Essex. This is a rhino's skull discovered in Whitefriars Street in London, and this is a rhino's jaw discovered in Fleet Street in London. They have discovered the remains of rhinos all over the world. This one is in London's Natural History Museum. It is a woolly rhino that was found in Poland in Eastern Europe. They have been discovering a high number of woolly rhino remains all over Eurasia, from England all the way down to Siberia. They have also found a rhino that is unique only to the United States alone, the Brontotherium, that had two horns in the front of its head, and a Diceritherium that was also only found in the United States. But the largest known rhino known to man was discovered in China in East Asia. It has been titled, and the narrator knows he'll pronounce it wrong, the Paraceratherium. It was taller than a giraffe. It was the weight of around 4 elephants and has been described as the biggest land mammal that walked this earth. and today it would be described as giganticism, and it was attributed to a time, as Thomas Dix said, though an evolutionist later coined the phrase Pleistocene or Pleistocene, which in geology is the most recent or uppermost division of the tertiary formation, of which the fossil remains belong almost wholly to existing species.
Is he the only one?
Oh, you didn't know about the 30-foot wolf?
The wolf is a dog-like carnivorous canine that is native to Eurasia and North America. And if you think that film clip was an exaggeration, they found a severed head of an Ice Age wolf that was nearly twice the size of its modern-day descendants in Siberia. This is the actual head of this wolf, and we're getting a picture that animals have shrunk over time, which I'll give a few more examples. Today's dragonflies are insects you can hold in your hand, but its early now extinct forebears was one of the largest known flying insects to ever exist. That was 1/4 of the size of a modern man's body. It has been termed the Meganeura, and some of their fossil remains are on display in Oxford in England. This is a lemur the narrator filmed in London Zoo. It is a mammal that is endemic to Madagascar. This skull of its early forebears in London's Natural History Museum shows that it was originally the size of a modern mountain gorilla. The narrator filmed these deers in London's Richmond Park, but their antlers are a lot smaller than their forebears called the Irish elk, whose species spread from Ireland to Siberia, and whose antlers reached a maximum of 12 feet from tip to tip. That is huge. This is a frog in North America, but the skull of its forebears is huge in comparison to its current descendants. A beaver is a semi-aquatic rodent that can be found in Eurasia and North America. When they unearthed the fossil of its forebears in North America, it was the size of a modern-day black bear. When you compare the skull of a modern beaver on the left and its earlier forebear on the right, you can clearly see the comparison in size. It has shrunk. Very recently in Colombia in South America, one of the world's largest collections of prehistoric art has been discovered in the Amazonian rainforest, with paintings that cover almost 8 miles, with the oldest depiction of people actually interacting with huge creatures that are now extinct in Latin America. The sloth is a mammal that spends most of its time in the trees either eating or sleeping. You could carry it in your arms, but its predecessors are absolutely huge compared to their descendants. This was one of the animals depicted in the cave art. This is an armadillo, a mammal that is endemic to South America, known for its tough bands of armor. You could hold it in your hand, but its predecessor that was depicted on the Colombian art was the size of a Volkswagen Beetle car, and though it is not currently on display in the Natural History Museum, this creature was huge in comparison to its later successor. So what happened? As we have recorded, scientists have documented that we are only seeing 1% of the remaining species left in the animal kingdom. You see, the ostrich is a flightless bird that is native to Africa, and it is the heaviest living bird alive. But when you compare it to the extinct elephant bird that once roamed Madagascar just off the coast of Africa, its egg looks a whole lot smaller to the elephant bird. This bird apparently laid the largest egg of any species that lived on this earth. But it is no longer with us, and the flightless ostrich would have been a lot smaller than the extinct 12-foot tall moa bird of New Zealand that was twice as tall as modern man, and the ostrich head would have not been even close in size to what is known as the terror birds that once roamed Argentina in South America. So all these creatures you are currently looking at once lived on this earth. They have been found all over the planet, and they are some of the 99% of the creatures that are now gone, never to be seen again. A number of animals have been wiped out in recent times as a result of European expansion, such as the dodo, the thylacine, the auk bird, the stellacea that was wiped out in 3 decades, and during the Boer War in South Africa, the quagga, a distant relative to the zebra, was hunted into extinction by the Dutch and the British in the 19th century. Do you think it will ever be possible to see the lysosaur ever again, that strange looking creature? Or the flying creature, the pterosaur? It would be nice. But there are 2 conflicting ideas that both promise that it can be possible. On this road in London, England, once lived an English naturalist who has shaped the modern scientific community's thinking. His ideas were only a revival of the Greek philosopher Anaximander. And Charles Darwin said that at the present day, almost all naturalists admit evolution under some form, the doctrine of natural selection or the survival of the fittest. Why have not apes acquired the intellectual powers of man, he asks. Could, he said, a carnivorous animal have been converted into one with aquatic habits? For how could the animal in its transitional state subsisted? Maybe because there's no evidence. Although no graduated links of structure fitted for gliding through the air now connect the Galeopithecus with other insectivora, yet there is no difficulty in supposing that such links formerly existed. An ordinary hoofed quadruped might be converted into a giraffe. Why, if species have descended from other species by fine graduations, do we not see innumerable transitional forms? Why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth? Why do we not find closely linking intermediate varieties? This, perhaps, is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory. A man who doubts his own ideas. That's interesting. As paleontologists continue to plow through the different strata of the Earth's crust, they are discovering that the fossil record does not show different species evolving into one another. And as a result of the false modern theory that lacks any evidence, this and other factors still has not stopped men on thinking that he has the power to bring these extinct creatures back to life. And if you carefully look at these articles, there is a key word that keeps coming up: resurrect or resurrection. If the narrator's history is correct, I do believe there is only one person who said that I am the resurrection and the life. And as people are losing a lot of confidence in both the mainstream media and modern science, we must be able to offer something that is more honest and more reliable. In the previous study, we proved through archaeological, geographical and linguistic research that the book of Isaiah can be relied upon as a solid, reliable historical record. And if we can rely on it to give us a pinpoint accurate description of the past, then we can rely on it to give us an accurate description of the future. And the most quoted prophetic writer in the New Testament describes the second coming of Christ in Isaiah chapter 2 verses 10 and 19, that is just revived in Revelation chapter 6 and verse 16 when describing the earth reaction of seeing the Lord in his true majesty and glory. Isaiah chapter 25 and verse 8 also prophesied the total eradication of, guess what? Death. And this text was quoted in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verses 26 and 54. This will all take place when, according to Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 22, and reinforced in Revelation chapter 21 and verse 1, God will be recreating a brand new heaven and a brand new earth. The scientist theologian Thomas Dix said that the physical constitution of our globe will undergo an important change. The aerial heavens shall pass away with a mighty noise. The elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works therein shall be burned up. And from the ashes of the conflagration, new heavens and a new earth shall be constructed and arranged, wherein righteousness shall forever dwell. 2 centuries ago, this man was quoting from 2 Peter chapter 3 verses 13 and 14. And when you parallel it carefully with Ephesians chapter 5 verses 26 and 27 and 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 23, God has a divine criteria for eternity. And any preacher, ministry and layman that teaches that you will be continuing to sin until Christ returns, you and your followers will all be destroyed at the brightness of his coming. You see, the bride has to make herself ready for the bridegroom, so make sure you have on a pure wedding garment. In the new heaven and in the new earth, the 99% of creatures that are now extinct will be recreated all over again. And God promises us that there will be complete harmony between both man and beast, something today that looks virtually impossible.
So you see why it is important to understand natural history. Now in this section we're going to be dealing with human history. Now I was raised in a home that taught me never ever look down upon other people, because you never know what's going to befall you. So I do not do videos to pull down other people. I will challenge people but not pull down people. So in this section we're going to be seeing how to study history. I'm going to teach you all the different methods and all the different equipment that I use to put these videos together.
The narrator will give you a window view on how his mind thinks, so you can see how he researches a topic. When he approaches a subject, he looks at the 5 W's to assess it: who, what, where, when, and why. When he is researching an issue, he closely analyzes the subject and does a very thorough background check on the subject before presenting it to the public. And when he is searching for truths, he follows the divine blueprint that you have to search for knowledge like you are searching for treasure. Now, the narrator does not have a racialized worldview, neither a one-sided, institutionalized, westernized, Republican, conservative worldview, but he has a biblical worldview where he tries to make his thoughts in harmony with the heavenly blueprint. Why does he believe in the authority of this book? In the 4th chapter of the book of Genesis, it records that the first men to ever walk this earth were technologically advanced, sophisticated intellectuals from the beginning. But today, this belief system has been challenged by man-made ideas that developed in post-Reformation Europe, that we are more technologically sophisticated today than ever before. But now that system is being challenged constantly by new archaeological discoveries. In ancient Egypt in North Africa, they have found architecture with stone blocks so large and carved so precise that modern cranes would not be able to carry them. So if we are so advanced and sophisticated today, why can't you catch up to the architectural genius of our forebears? In a country called Lebanon in Western Asia, they discovered the largest stone block ever known to man. Modern man has not matched this level of construction. And anytime they want to explain away something, they say aliens came down and built it. They can't explain the stone construction of those heads on the Easter Island. That's a mystery to modern man. And they are very puzzled how these huge stone blocks in Saskatchewan in Peru were put together that still withstands earthquakes, and how the people of Peru were able to build so high up into the mountains. They don't know how they constructed together Stonehenge in England either, and men were building and mapping out cities thousands of years ago in the Middle East. They had an intricate medical knowledge of the human heart among the Olmecs in Mesoamerica in Mexico, and sculpted the human form in detail in very early Europe in the Northern Hemisphere. And men in the 19th century like Sir Austin Henry Layard, Ignatius Loyola Donnelly and William Golding said that early man was just as highly sophisticated as us, and their words are now being confirmed. For the London Guardian published an article in October 2021 titled "Unfreezing the Ice Age: The Truth About Humanity's Deep Past," and it read that, "So what are we to make of all this evidence for princely burials, stone temples, mammoth monuments, and bustling centres of trade and craft production stretching back far into the Ice Age? What are they doing there in a Paleolithic world?" Well, read Genesis chapter 4 verses 17 to 22 and you will get your answers. What we do know is that we are composite products of this original mosaic of human populations. Early humans were our intellectual equals. Little has changed. The narrator knew from a very young child that all these truths would one day come to light, so that man has no excuse. He did not know why he felt that way, but now he understands why. When the narrator purchases a book, he studies the bibliography, the footnotes, and the index to see where that author acquired their material from. For the further you go back, the deeper the research. So in a book titled The Papacy by Dr. James Aiken Wiley, he quotes from Sir Arthur Henry Layard's Nineveh and Its Remains, and Layard quotes from Edward Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Now, Gibbon got his inspiration for writing that volume of work when he was on a tour in Rome, as he taught himself both Latin and Greek. He lived on the same road of James Smithson and compiled his great work in this house. And despite his deep-rooted racial prejudices, he was probably the last great Western historian. But how did he research his material? He read the works of historians Homer, Xenophon, Herodotus, Pliny, Cicero, Strabo, Tacitus, Cornelius Nepos, and Flavius Josephus from the Greco-Roman world, and chronologists like the French statesman Jacques-Auguste Rousseau, James Ussher, Joseph Justus Scaliger, Humphrey Prideaux, Robert Marsham, and Sir Isaac Newton. And he advises the best method on how to research by using a variety of sources. He said that if all our historians were lost, medals, inscriptions, and other monuments would be sufficient to record the travels of Hadrian. Let us show two examples. The 1994-95 film Queen Margot highlights a very nasty and disturbing episode in modern European history: the August 1572 St. Bartholomew's massacre that took place in France, where Catholics brutally murdered Protestants. Neither age nor gender was spared. This painting by Francois Dubois, a Huguenot painter, is a visual record of it at that time period. Now, René Fuller Miller, the Austrian historian, published a book in 1930 titled The Power and the Secret of the Jesuits, where he documented that Diego Lainez, the Black Pope, the second Superior General of the Jesuits, masterminded the whole plot of the massacre. In London's Victorian and Albert Museum, it has a copy of Fox's Book of Martyrs that also records that massacre, so it is a reliable source close to that time period. And in the British Museum, on the main floor, there is a coin of Pope Gregory XIII, where he is glorifying this genocide in France of Protestants. The other example is a record of an Egyptian pharaoh in the Bible. In Jeremiah chapter 46 and verse 1, the Hebrew prophet records a 26th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh. Necho or Necho is his name, but his name wasn't only preserved in the Bible. Herodotus, the 5th century BC Greek historian, records his construction of a canal that cost the lives of 120,000 Egyptians in his Book 2, section 138 and 139. And an artifact from Egypt has the pharaoh's name inscribed on it in the ancient Egyptian language. And the deciphering of the Egyptian hieroglyphs was through the painstaking efforts of English scholar Thomas Young and French linguist Jean-Francois Champollion. That is how we can read the ancient Egyptian language today. So the method the narrator uses by going to original sources so that your argument is authentic was reintroduced by Leopold von Ranke, the 19th century German historian who has been titled as the founder of modern source-based history. That is why the narrator has become a member over the years of a number of libraries and archival institutions so that he can see the original documents of the day instead of reading material from deeply biased second-hand historians. The narrator is also a realist, for realism is a practice of regarding things in their true nature and dealing with them as they are, which is freedom from prejudice and convention, practical views and policy. He is not in any way, shape or form an idealist. Now, the narrator knows that all churches start off with the right intentions, but after a while complacency takes over and eternity turns into a myth, and the churches today, with the exception of a few zealous members, are all about making money and showcasing this fake false persona to the public. The narrator's faith has always been in the Word of God, not in a church system. The narrator does not riot, yell or debate politics. Do you want to know why? As a realist, you learn that we present our society as being one of free initiative, individualism and idealism, when in reality those are mostly words. We are a centralized managerial society of an essential bureaucratic nature and motivated by a materialism which is only slightly mitigated by truly spiritual or religious concerns. If you closely study history, you will observe that every single ancient civilization in history, especially throughout Afro-Eurasia, is dominated by a dynastic hierarchy, usually by bloodlines, and a secret elite group that covertly governs the nation. And this system still continues to this very day. In the UK, while many are angry with their politicians, and you really can't blame them, the narrator carefully studies how the British system works. In the Guardian newspaper, an article titled "Secret Freemasons Lodges for MPs and Journalists," dated to Monday, the 5th of February 2018. It documents that many of the High Court judges, police, MPs, peers, parliamentary staff, members of the political press corps and prominent journalists in the UK and members of the royal family are members of Masonic lodges. So it is a very well organized system of privilege. That is how Britain is governed. The current British Prime Minister, as of this recording, Boris Johnson, and the first British Prime Minister, the Honourable Robert Walpole, were both educated in the same school. It is a school that promotes British elitism, the school that rules Britain and has turned the country into their playground, that educated 20 of Britain's 55 Prime Minister, Eton Boys' School. But it is not the only elite system that runs Britain. There is also another school that trains tomorrow's British leaders.
The entire ruling group of the different factions in British politics in our time, with the exception of Corbyn, Farage, he doesn't really have a party, they all come from Oxford. And so have 11, as I say, 11 of 15 post-war prime ministers. So there's something very interesting about Oxford's grip on British power that is worth investigating.
Oxford is still ranked as the top university on earth in recent years. And though it profited handsomely from the Atlantic slave trade, and one of its largest funding is still from a fascist dynasty whose professors still glorify the brutal episode of colonialism, Oxford boasts it has produced many of Britain's prime ministers. That includes Boris Johnson, Theresa May, David Cameron, Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher. And to reinforce that system, the British people and the rest of the world are fed with programs like Downtown Abbey that psychologically reinforces that Britain will always be governed by a privileged, autocratic, aristocratic elite system to teach the whole of the British society to keep the class system and to know your place. The narrator studied out this system from September 2000 to May 2022, where he purchased a number of George Orwell books where you learn about free speech, fascism, the class system, and surveillance, and how Britain is run. In his book, Why I Write, and the very words on the front of the book tells you that politicians always feed us with half-truths. He said that the English have absorbed a quarter of the earth and held onto it by a huge navy. How dare they then turn around and say that war is wicked? England is the most class-ridden country under the sun. It is a land of snobbery and privilege, ruled largely by the old and silly. The narrator also never brought into the whole war on terror hype and scenario either, for world leaders condemn what they are also doing themselves, so that they can take away people's freedoms and fatten the pockets of a few.
The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway. 75.
Because the FBI have accidentally, it seems, developed a system which works rather well. And the system is they make up a terrorist plot, they find someone to try and carry it out, and they arrest them for doing that.
And then get the kudos for having fought the Great War against terrorism.
Well, they get all sorts of things, really. I mean, it's quite complicated, but I guess the essential element of our story is that these people are not terrorists, but the government ends up putting them in jail
for very long
as if they
terms.
were. Yes, 25, 30 years. And there's a close to 100% conviction rate in these cases.
The narrator's most interesting study of history is Bible prophecy, and the book of Revelation gives you a detailed account of who are the true global players on this earth, and it forewarns both the church and the world of a geopolitical power whose unseen cryptic influence has affected the most powerful global players in finance, business, tech, and politics. Revelation chapter 18 verse 3 records its global influence on heads of state and its business transactions in the financial sector with the merchants of the earth. What exactly is a merchant? It is one who carries on trade on a large scale, especially a man who exports goods and sells them by wholesale.
BlackRock is a financial giant. It's the largest investor on planet Earth with over $9 trillion in assets. That's a pile of cash equal to about 1/10 of a year's global economic activity. That means the money managers at BlackRock have a big say in how the world runs. BlackRock is indeed influential. In the US, it owns at least 5% of most major companies. That gives the firm lots of voting power to determine how public businesses operate. 78% of the firm's revenue is derived from investment advisory fees collected from products like ETFs.
American billionaire Larry Fink is the co-founder and the current CEO of BlackRock Inc. He's on the board of directors on the Council of Foreign Relations, third at the bottom, and the board of the World Economic Forum, where is the third face on the right. He built BlackRock Inc. into the biggest money manager the planet has ever seen, where he has become the most powerful person in global finance, a consigliere to presidents and prime ministers, and with clout in almost every major corporate boardroom in the world, who invests in China, consults top US officials that include the Federal Reserve, and also advises the European Union. Brian Deese is the senior economic advisor to US President Joe Biden. He was a former employee at BlackRock. And Michael Pyle, the chief economic advisor to US Vice President Kamala Harris, was formerly the global chief investment strategist for BlackRock. This is the merchants of the earth's global control over the world economy. And even when most people are overlooking the war in the Ukraine for weariness of hearing about war, it still cannot be totally ignored because it indirectly affects every single one of us. But others are financially profiting from it. This is a grave in London, England, of a London-based Polish man named Joseph Rettinger. Very, very few people know who he is, for he was a behind-the-scenes player. But this picture of him seated on the front desk at the far left is a meeting he put together in that very hotel called the Bilderberg. And in the Bilderberg conference or meeting in the year 2022, its high-powered guest list includes, according to the London Guardian, the heads of NATO, the CIA, GCHQ, the US National Security Council, 2 European prime ministers, a healthy sprinkling of tech billionaires, and Henry Kissinger. And just a few days before the meeting, Zelensky, Ukraine's president, met with a Bilderberg and US intelligence representative, Alex Karp, who runs Palantir, the infamous CIA-funded surveillance and data analysis company. Palantir, which was set up by billionaire Bilderberg insider Peter Thiel, has agreed to give digital support to the Ukrainian army, according to a tweet by the country's deputy prime minister.
Palantir, the big data firm analyzing the Ukraine conflict. Palantir Software has been providing analysis of the crisis unfolding in Ukraine to assist the US government and military. For example, one area was being monitored as Russian troops massed on the Ukrainian border. Images were taken of a site just north of Ukraine. Over just a 2-day time period, there was 1,200 satellite flyovers.
Now, Cargill is an agribusiness company, the largest privately owned company in the United States, that acts as a middleman between farms and big food companies. They are praised by the World Economic Forum, but the New York Times calls her the worst company in the world. Why? According to The Guardian, a giant leap in global food prices caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine has helped 3 members of the super-rich Cargill family, who majority own one of the world's largest food companies, join the ranks of the world's 500 richest companies. Now, this may or may not shock you, but on their official website, dated to November the 12th, 2015, it said that on Monday and Tuesday, 65 international policymakers, academics, business and thought leaders gathered at the World Wildlife Fund's headquarters in Washington, D.C. to game out how the world would respond to a future food crisis. This is 7 years ago. The game took the players from the year 2020, lockdown year, to 2030. As it was projected, the decade brought 2 major food crises with prices approaching 400% of the long-term average, a raft of climate-related extreme weather events, governments toppling in Pakistan, Imran Khan, and Ukraine, and famine and refugee crises in Bangladesh, Myanmar, Chad, and, interesting, Sudan. So we are all in a game, just pawns on the global grand chessboard, and things are always planned way ahead of time, and things are heating up. And when you see a geopolitician waving a Ukrainian flag in his headquarters, you know who he is siding with. For that system has not only endorsed the Great Reset Plan of the World Economic Forum, where the current Pope praises globalist Professor Klaus Schwab, but as the narrator has been consistent in saying for 10 years, all roads will eventually lead us to Rome.
The world as we know it has changed. Altering our current path to the future requires a strong and proactive leadership. The global economy is in transition. Now is the time to come together as governments, as nations, as people, putting nature at the heart of how we innovate.
You can never let a crisis go to waste, and you have to say in this crisis, what are the lessons we have to take for ourselves?
First official day of World Government Summit here at Dubai Expo 2020. And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
This would be a government, a world government, where you don't get to vote on anybody. This is everybody's worst nightmare. The bureaucracy that we have trouble in our United States because we don't get to vote on them, we vote indirectly. Can you imagine the one world bureaucracy of all these elitists and their private jets that would rule our country and we wouldn't get to vote? So I'm dead set against this. And they used to call people who talked about one world government, they used to say, oh, it's a conspiracy. And we would always say, no, it's in their mission statement. They say it at every meeting. That's what they're for.
So what exactly is the New World Order, and how will every one of us be affected? The narrator in this study will approach it from a behavioral science perspective. For as sleep is essential to rebuild our bodies, and it makes us more sharp and alert throughout the day, they have observed that children today sleep 20% less than children 100 years ago. Similar results in adults also, where they are also becoming more and more, sadly, forgetful. There seems to be a very clever dumbing down. Back in the day, people went out to do their shopping. But today, people are more lazy and someone delivers it at your house. As America is the nation that leads global trends, what starts out there influences the rest of the world. For in a book titled Propaganda, published in the year 1928, Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, said, "We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. As big business becomes bigger, the need for expert manipulation of its innumerable contacts with the public will become greater. The public is made up of interlocking groups: economic, social, religious, educational, cultural, racial, collegiate, local, sports, and hundreds of others. News reaches the public through the printed word, books, magazines, letters, posters, circulars, and banners, newspapers, through pictures, photographs, and motion pictures, through the air, lectures, speeches, band music, radio, campaign songs, the exploitation of personalities in motion pictures. The media by which special leaders transmit their messages to the public through propaganda include all the means by which people today transmit their ideas to one another. So these are all the different methods that will be used. In a book titled The Aquarian Conspiracy, published in 1980, the late Marilyn Ferguson elaborates and details all of the different players who are involved. A leaderless but powerful network is working to bring about radical changes in the United States and the rest of the world. The network is the Aquarian Conspiracy. It is a conspiracy without a political manifesto. There are school teachers and office workers, famous scientists, governmental officials and lawmakers, artists and millionaires, taxi drivers and celebrities, leaders in medicine, education, law, and psychology. There are legions of conspirators. They are in corporations, universities and hospitals, on the faculties of schools, in factories and doctors' offices, in state and federal agencies, on city councils and the White House staff, in state legislatures, in volunteer organizations, in virtually all arenas of policy making in the United States. Scientist philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin prophesied the phenomenon central to this book: a conspiracy of men and women whose new perspective, or paganized worldview, would trigger a critical contagion of change. Teilhard was the individual most often named as a profound influence by the Aquarian conspirators who responded to a survey. His books have now sold millions and have been translated into virtually every language. So this French Roman Catholic Jesuit priest, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, is the most respected authority in New Age and occult circles, who foretold that people in every profession will be marketing these New Age, New World Order ideas. But how exactly will it work? What changes will happen? When the narrator was growing up as a child in London, England, life was a lot different to how it is today. Without the modern digital devices, you had to be creative. The narrator used to play football outside with friends and for the neighborhood team, where you would exchange football cards with each other and read the same comics like Roy of the Rovers with Hotshot Hamish. Children used to be outside, skipping in the playground either at school or in the neighborhood for a very, very long time. They'd be playing frisbee in the park, or a child would be flying their kite. Do children still do these things? You'd be playing with your long string of your yo-yo, trying to master the complex squares of the Rubik's Cube, and riding in the neighborhood with your BMX bike. And if you were indoors, the narrator would play marbles in the passageway with his older brothers. And if family and friends were around, they used to play board games like Monopoly and Connect 4 that the narrator really loved. Children were trained to be creative, and they would use objects to expand their minds with different puzzles to challenge them. Even television was different, and when the narrator was growing up in the UK, TV for children and for adults was a little more educational and fun, and he will give you a sneak preview of what he used to watch that inspired him to go into the study of media in later life, where he would learn the media techniques that he observed and use it for the glory of God.
The water in Mallorca doesn't taste like what it ought to.
No. The water in Mallorca don't taste like what it ought to.
The water in Mallorca doesn't taste quite how it should.
Mallorca.
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 I'm the storyteller, and my stories must be told. I have many stories, tales for both the young and old.
The stories that are being told today are very different, and it is very important that if you are a parent, you have to understand that the dynamics of the modern world has drastically changed. Though violence has always been in this world from antiquity, modern entertainment has become a lot more darker, nihilistic and stoic, where children are being taught prehistoric violent tribalism because they do have access to adult video games. There was a time adults protected them, but today they are exposed to a lot more. The news is no longer about honest reporting to the public, but individuals use their influential platforms to humiliate other people or groups for higher ratings, a sort of self-righteousness, where the trickle-on-down effect has created a very negative, judgmental culture. This is known as negativity bias, where we instinctively focus a lot more on negative things. And when the Wall Street Journal conducted a study and exposed Facebook files, they showed that the algorithms are cleverly designed to market more negative news to make society more and more angry. That is behavioral science. And it has also been shown that the mainstream media distorts and exaggerates negative news that shapes our thinking and dominates our worldview and offers no hope but governmental control. Freudian methods are still being used to manipulate societies, and children are sadly being discouraged to be creative, where they are becoming less and less creative, and the state is attempting to control how people run their homes. And the state also believes that it is their right to raise your children where you have no say in the matter. The clickbait social media world manipulates the very young minds, and today's homes are now modern battlegrounds where parents are in a fight on how to raise their children in a very fast-paced world. And as the liberty of free speech is under constant attack, the New World Order plan to hide history and reprogram this current generation's worldview is now underway, and there is no reversing the trend.
This is our chance to control the truth, the concepts of right and wrong for everyone for centuries to come. You're fighting to save an ideal that doesn't exist. Never did. You need to pick a side.
Now, have any of you guys ever seen one of these bad things for real? We burned almost every physical book in the country. So by the time you guys grow up, there won't be one book left. Burn it.
I give consent to sever my memories between my work life and my personal life. I acknowledge that once the procedure is complete, I will be unable to access my personal memories whilst on the severed floor.
Say gratitude.
Our ideas about technology that we think are normal are actually ideas that come from a very small and homogeneous group of people.
The technology is being rapidly adopted, and there are no safeguards.
We are socially controlled in a way that we don't see.
The housekeeper system gathers data from whoever lives at Foregate Street to improve the user experience.
Kimmy?
I'm here.
What time is it?
It's 7:26 a.m.
Kimmy?
I'm here.
Call Dr. Burns.
Get up! Hi, Bixby!
Alexa.
Hey Google.
Hi, Bixby!
Humankind as a whole is not the crown of creation. You're setting the stage for something that transcends us. A new form of life is emerging.
I'm talking to someone from another planet.
So am I.
Imagine that we are all connected by the very fabric of the universe. An invisible field that bonds us together. You, me, the stars.
What has he got? Not himself to say the thing.
By not believing God is with you, but by believing you are God.
Humans and dinosaurs can't coexist. We created an ecological disaster.
Time travel exists. This world.
That was awesome.
Do you want to know where some of these different modern ideas can be traced to? For they are all just different forms of New World Order ideologies to cleverly paganize the modern mind. The English writer H.G. Wells was the first to introduce the concept of time travel. Charles Darwin, the English naturalist, taught that humans and dinosaurs did not coexist. Carl Sagan, the US astrophysicist, taught that we are descended from the stars. And Alfonso de Liguori, the Italian Catholic bishop, taught that priests are gods. They're all just different ways of saying man does not need a creator. And there is also another method being used to subtly enforce and crush independent thought. The music industry is one of the most powerful mediums that shape societies and modern cultures, and that also starts trends, where today both men and women are all tattooed up, and people are constantly complaining that all the music and the dance moves in modern pop culture looks and sounds exactly the same, and it looks cheap. Now why is that? Let us give one example. The group Rage Against the Machine was once outspoken against the foreign policy of the US government, but now they have changed their position, and one man has now accused them of marketing government rock. You see, the music industry is controlled by a handful of people who have decided that there is to be no artistic creativity. For as music can be used to shape radical ideas, they have it today under tight control, but they will crush any dissenting voice, so that everyone can stay in line with the New World Order Great Reset agenda, where people will also be parroting the exact same New Age, New World Order phrases.
For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you, here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship.
Now, there is a force, energy, consciousness, divine thread, I believe, that connects all spiritually to all of us, to something greater than ourselves. There is no life without a spiritual life, because we are all spiritual beings having a human experience.
When I'm asked sometimes, well, what are you? I'm a spirit being having a human experience. I'm God having a human experience.
From its embryonic beginnings in the late 1700s, the United States of America adopted the pagan iconography from ancient Egypt as its official badge of identity, its seals, the all-seeing eye and the bird with the blazing sun above its head. And all the modern world does is just reintroduce the ideas from the ancient world. For the goat, an animal created on the 6th day of creation, became the Babylonian astrological god Sagittarius that you can find on display in the British Museum and other museums. And this paganistic belief system has never really gone away, especially when people ask you what your star sign is. That is superstitious paganism. And all over the world, every single ethnic group participates in the Hindu, Buddhist Kundalini serpent worship practice of yoga. And when its origins were traced, they found its oldest images were carved into stone onto seals discovered in the Indus Valley civilization in South Asia. But there was another practice that has been ongoing from the earliest civilizations, and it has never stopped, and it was used in our modern climate to keep the whole world in line.
Fear is driving the world like never before. Humans act in very predictable ways when they're frightened.
And we've only gone and found a way to make money out of it.
When the narrator was studying media in college many moons ago, while studying film studies, our class went through every single Alfred Hitchcock film, and it was discovered that his Catholic Jesuit education of guilt and fear ran right throughout all of his films. For intelligent men have learned that throughout history, fear is one of the most powerful and effective tools to keep the civilian population obedient to the state, where they will not question nothing. This has been proven a fact of recent. The British government published a report titled Mind Space, Influencing Behavior Through Public Policy. So they openly tell you the different Edward Bernays strategies they use to control the behavior in a society. And they are now openly admitting that during the lockdown, the British state cleverly used, guess what? Behavioral science to do what? Scare a nation into submission, as documented in the Telegraph. Yep, they admit that they used, guess what? Fear to control behavior in the COVID crisis that was totalitarian, admit scientists. That was just a trial run for something a lot bigger, for fear has been the foundation of every government's power, a study has shown, and this can be traced all the way back to antiquity, to the Orient in the Near East in Mesopotamia, in the River Euphrates in ancient Babylon, where they used fear in the most feared demon in the Babylonian pantheon, Pazuzu, who is called the Lord of the Air, like Satan is titled in the Bible. So if you really want to clearly understand how the New World Order works, you need to study history, for man just repeats where his forefathers have left off. The narrator will now briefly teach you on how to effectively research. Everyone should have their own personal library in their home. If you can spend £200 or dollars on shoes or whatever currency you use, then you can spend the same amount of money on books. If you do not have the capital, depending on where you live in the world, you should become a member of the local library so that you can familiarize yourself with the study of history and its relevance for today. Ashurbanipal, the 7th century BC Neo-Assyrian king, who is mostly depicted in art in the British Museum hunting or in battle, had a vast library of over 30,000 clay tablets written in cuneiform in a number of different Near Eastern languages that contain knowledge on math, science, astronomy, geometry, grammar, and religion. The infamous library of Timbuktu in Mali in West Africa has around 70,000 manuscripts dated from around the 13th century AD, written in 3 different languages that also covers a vast variety of topics that included art, medicine, philosophy, and science, and a number of men also knew the great benefits of having their own library. In this building in London, England, as shown in a previous study, once lived Frederick Douglass, an abolitionist, orator, statesman, and writer, and the most photographed man or American in the 19th century. In his house in the United States in Washington, D.C., he made sure that he had a vast personal library in response to the denying of blacks to read during the slavocracy episode of US history. In this building in London, England, alongside the Iranian and Ethiopian embassies, also shown in a previous study, was also the temporal residence of another US citizen and international banker who once dominated corporate finance on Wall Street, John Piermont Morgan. In JP Morgan's home in the United States in New York City, in the white section of this building on the right was his own private library. And these men knew that to better understand the world that they were living in, they needed a vast volume of books in their library. The last one is Sir James August Murray, who was a Scottish lexicographer and philologist, who was the chief editor of the Oxford English Dictionary. As he was fascinated with the origin of words in languages, all of the photos you see him in, he's always completely surrounded by books, for without them the modern English language dictionary would not have been accomplished. So if you want to expand your thinking, instead of being spoon-fed by others, start building a collection of books from scratch where you can expand your own personal homemade library. You should always have a notebook on you and a pen, so that if you have any ideas in your head, you can instantly write them down so you won't forget it. You may want to log your ideas on a digital device, but if it crashes or if you lose it, if you have it written on a notebook, at least you have it backed up on ink and paper. All of the narrator's methods he uses can be traced to the Bible when he conducts his method of research. The Apostle Paul in 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 13 had his own books and parchments. And in Acts chapter 17 and verse 28, he used secular sources to prove his points to the Greeks in Athens. While most Christians will only use religious material, the narrator follows the apostolic method that uses all material to prove your point. The Holy Scriptures also stresses throughout the Old and the New Testament that you need 2 or 3 witnesses to prove your point. One reference is not good enough, it doesn't carry enough weight. That is why you should have a vast library so you can argue your case intelligently with all the right resource materials. As the narrator's late grandparents taught his mother and her siblings to be free thinkers and to have your own mind and don't let anybody force you into an ideology, the narrator continues that school of thinking and always encourages the viewers to research for themselves so that no one can manipulate you and suck you into an idea without you doing your own thorough background investigation into what is presented to you. You will need a budget, for you cannot do anything without money. That is if you plan to make videos and become a content creator. The narrator purchased the desktop computer, an iMac, 10 years ago in 2012, when he started Even at the Doors. And that is what he uses for editing. And the software that he uses is Adobe Premiere, that you will have to pay a monthly fee for. It used to be a one-off purchase, but they changed their policy. The narrator also has a MacBook Pro that he purchased the same time as his iMac. And though it is on its last legs, it still does the job. He still uses it for three things: to take screenshots of certain articles, for a program called ScreenFlow that can capture and take videos of whatever is in the screen in front of you, and he also uses it for Adobe Photoshop when he wants to carve out certain images or shapes, specifically of individuals who he quotes from, and he will show you how he does it. You can either click on the third icon on the left, and then you can carve around the image hands-free. That'll take within a minute or so. After you have completed it, you can go to the icon background in the right click and highlight the text layer from background and click OK. If you want to sharpen edges, go to the section feather and it will make the surrounding edges a bit more professional, and then you can save it under the file PNG. If you click on the fourth icon on the left, you can just click on the image, and depending on the size of the file, it can be accomplished quite quickly. It won't take too long. All of your work should be backed up on an external portable hard drive. If you have a reasonable budget, you should purchase at least 2. The most reliable and the best hard drives, in the narrator's humble opinion, is Lassie. They are rugged and durable, and you will not have any problems with them. They are brilliant. Whatever terabyte in size you choose is down to yourself. You can either purchase them from their own website, or you can get it cheaper on Amazon. But if you do not want to finance Jeff Bezos, you can also purchase it from eBay. But a backup hard drive is a must. If you want to do voice recordings, Zoom Handy recorders are the best to use if you cannot use a recording studio. You are hearing the narrator's voice from this device. The quality is very good, and you will need to purchase some headphones also, so that you can play back what you have recorded, so you don't have to make any mistakes in your sound quality. If you want to download videos for a project, though the narrator has never used them, Artlist is a company that does both videos and royalty-free music, so you don't have to get stumped by copyright laws. And ArtGrid is another one also. They are meant to be good for creator content. The narrator used to use Pond 5. They are very good, but they are quite expensive. Most of the narrator's music comes from them. The videos of Charles Darwin, Christopher Columbus, and the metallic image of the prophetic book of Daniel was all purchased from Pond 5. But the site called Storyblocks, originally called Videoblocks, is what the narrator has been using for 10 years consistently. Most of the video clips you see in the videos of Even at the Doors are purchased from this site. You pay an annual fee and you get unlimited access to most videos in either 180p or 4K. When the narrator first visited the site, her clients were MTV, the Discovery Channel, and National Geographic, who also use their services. The website Fiverr is very good if you are completely new to the game. And if you'd like some professional voiceovers done if you're not confident with your own voice, or a logo design or a website built, and some editing also, the narrator would strongly recommend setting up an account with them, and their freelance staff will do a very good service for you. They are very professional. In order for them to transfer a completed video file to yourself, you should create an account either with Dropbox, who are very good, or with WeTransfer. They are both good for sending and receiving files. When filming outdoors or indoors and you want a stable shot, the narrator uses a Manfrotto tripod. They are very stable even when there are very, very strong winds outdoors. The DJI Osmo Action was used at the beginning of the study when the narrator was filming himself going up the mountain in Ben Lomond in Scotland. and the current camera he uses to film is the Sony A7S that has helped to enhance the picture quality of the work. When filming outdoors, the narrator also uses Atmos Ninja Flame. This is what film directors use. They are very brilliant. They help you to see what you are shooting a lot more clearly. A SanDisk memory card is a must for both the voice recorder and your digital camera. And Sennheiser has one of the best microphones that you can connect to your camera when you are filming. So if you have a budget, you can purchase equipment. The narrator used his redundancy money to purchase his, so he didn't have to rely upon nobody. The narrator would like to give one more piece of advice and counsel. If you do get popular, be careful that the attention does not get to your head, for you will attract a lot of haters. And the narrator will tell you from experience that it is a very lonely road and you'll always have way more enemies than you will have friends. But if you want an all-rounded ministry, a man who lived in the town Kidderminster in the West Midlands in England in the 17th century gave the best counsel. His name was Richard Baxter, the Puritan royalist, who was one of the very few individuals who absolutely condemned the Atlantic slave trade. He wrote a book that the narrator can say is the greatest influence on his life by a Western writer. It is titled The Reformed Pastor, and the narrator has quoted some excerpt of it previously. And if you really want to sincerely win souls for eternity, listen to this man's advice from the lessons of the past. We must be serious, earnest, and zealous in every part of our work. Self-denial is of absolute necessity in every single Christian. Our work must be carried on with great humility, an essential part of the new creature. It is a contradiction in terms to be a Christian and not humble. All who will be Christians must be Christ's disciples and come to him to learn. And the lesson which he teacheth them is to be meek and lowly. All our teaching must be plain and simple as possible. Your study of physics and sciences is not worth a rush if it be not God that you seek after in them. The wisdom of the world must not be magnified against the wisdom of God. Prayer must carry on our work as well as preaching. Experience will teach you that men are not made learned or wise without hard study and unwearied labor and experience. He cannot succeed in healing the wounds of others who is himself unhealed by reason of neglecting himself. He neither benefits his neighbor nor himself. Go to the poor and see what they want and show compassion at once to their soul and body. We must be diligent in visiting the sick and helping them to prepare either for a fruitful life or a happy death. Take heed to yourselves, because the tempter will more ply you with his temptations than other men. He bears the greatest malice to those that are engaged to do him the greatest mischief. Take heed, therefore, brethren, for the enemy hath a special eye upon you. You shall have his most subtle insinuations and incessant solicitations and violent assaults, and whenever he ruineth you, he will make you the instruments of ruin to others. Take heed to yourselves, because there are many eyes upon you, and there will be many to observe your falls. How cautiously, then, should we walk before so many ill-minded observers? So I hope that this study was clear, and I hope you have a clearer understanding on how to research and how to get the right equipment. The next study, I'll be showing you why I started Even at the Doors. But in the meantime, as I always encourage you, please research everything you see in this study. Thank you.